Welcome, 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 everyone. Welcome to another edition of Remixing Politics and Culture with me, your host, Pam. I am a public relations and marketing professional with a passion for social justice, voter advocacy, and culture. And tonight, I'm going to present you with a breath of fresh air. Tonight, I have the honor of having two dynamic Gen Z student leaders whom I think are just phenomenal. Our future is in great hands with the leadership and tenacity that these two young people possess. Listen, the very fact that a person with 34 felony convictions and more to come is even running for the highest office in the land is absolutely crazy. And the fact that the race of the presidency is at a statistical dead heat is even more unnerving to me and should be to you also. That's why I have my two guests on the show tonight. We need to hear from them. We need to know that our future is in great hands and that there is hope. All right, so let me introduce Miss Jalia Taylor. Jalia is a senior at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. She is a leader through and through. Jalia is the co-founder of the Black Pre-Law Student Association, and she is the elected student body president, which covers approximately 32,000 students at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Jalia is passionate about social justice and voter protection. Currently, Jalia works on the Harris Waltz campaign as a communications intern. Welcome to the show, Jalia.
Hi, Pam. Thank you so much for excited for the conversation today.
Absolutely, absolutely. And next up, we have Greer Web. Greer is no stranger to the show. He is a former Moorhead Kane Scholar at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And he is currently in his second year in law school at the Emory School of Law in Atlanta, Georgia, with a full scholarship, I might add. Greer has co-founded the Young American Protests while he was at UNC, and he's been in 50 million gazillion things, Greer has in leadership. He received the highest student honor in 2022 as a Chancellor Award recipient. He currently has started a Law Students for Harris Coalition just last week. I always say he's my favorite Gen Zer, and I'm so proud to know him. Welcome back, Greer, to the show.
Thank you, Pam. It's so great to be here with you. And I love the updated intro. That was dope.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Compliments of my daughter. I'm so happy to say.
Awesome. That's awesome.
All right. Well, Julia, I'm going to start off with you. UNC, in all of its closed mindedness, has eliminated all of its diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. How do you feel that this decision has impacted the student body? And you can take your time.
Yeah, no, I mean, that is such a great question and is something that all of the students here on campus are really resonating with, especially now. Just recently, the UNC Office of Admissions has released its report, and we have seen a significant decrease in the amount of minority students that are in attendance at UNC. And so when I think about decisions like diversity, equity, inclusion being removed at the system-wide level and infiltrating into our school system, I think about how that office was created to make sure that things like that were addressed. And so going forward, I'm really curious as to how I'm going to be able to work with our admissions officers, as well as still maintaining DEI and the diverse values that our school says that they believe in. Really just holding that to heart. So
Mhm.
I'm really just hoping that I can continue to work with the admissions team and work with our former D&I officer. She still is at UNC and continuing on those efforts. We had planned to do a lot of targeted outreach programs to different high school communities because we
Mhm.
knew that affirmative action was going to be impacting this new class, and it did. And I think that's what we saw a couple of days ago with the significant decrease in the students, the out of low-income students at Carolina, just overall a decrease in the amount of marginalized students on campus.
Wow. I want to give a little bit of back history on how the UNC board became so right-leaning, because we really need to understand why voting matters. This is yet another aspect of voting, the complete down ballot races and what have you. So with I think it started when Governor McCrory used his power appointing people to the board, and I believe some of the rules were changed about how the UNC board could be made up. And with the Republican led state, in the legislature, this is what we got. And that is what made a big shift in the board. And hence the board made the big shift in policy overall. And therefore, voting matters. Here again, everybody, a lot of people just focus on the top of the ticket, the presidential elections, but midterm elections and voting down ballot matters. Would you agree with that, Jalia?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think especially this recent shift that we've seen with President Biden exiting the race and then Vice President Harris coming in to serve as the Democratic candidate. I think we've seen this resurgence of students, especially being excited about getting out to vote, because I think a lot of students were unenergized before. They didn't really know if their vote mattered a lot, and they weren't excited about the presidential candidates. And so I think this year, they're especially going to be excited to vote. And not only just, again, voting at the top, but going through and voting blue all down the ballot is so critical, especially in our state. There's a lot going on in North Carolina. We have two candidates for governor. We have Josh Stein and we have Mark Robinson. And Mark Robinson is what they're saying. He's trying to set us back. He's trying to take away things like abortion and access and reproductive health care for women. And so voting down blue down the ballot is really critical this year. And I think that's been a big part of my role, is making sure that students know how to vote, know that they can vote in North Carolina and get re-registered to vote here, and really make sure that their voice matters. And honestly, it's exciting because we have an on-site voting site on campus at the Sonia Haynes Stone Center. So we're trying to make it as convenient for students to vote as possible.
It's possible. That's great. Greer, what is at stake in this election? And are you hearing any of your fellow law students talking specifically about Project 2025? So a two-pronged question there for you.
Sure. And if I could, I'm going to add a third prong. I want to respond to what Jalia was saying there. And, I'm an alumnus now of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Jalia is doing great work as the student body president. All of that to say, I might be able to say some things that she can't say in her role. But look, I told her I was going to say this earlier. It's really nuts to me that UNC as an institution, but also the UNC system, is dismantling diversity efforts like this. First of all, North Carolina is a very diverse state. We have the largest Native American population east of the Mississippi. We have Black folks, we have Latino folks, Asian Americans. We have the mountains, we have the Research Triangle Park, and we have the coast. UNC is North Carolina's flagship university. It's this nation's first public university, and it's a global research institute. And so for us to be funneling and tightening our grip on the type of students that we allow in, not to even get into the diversity of socioeconomic status amongst North Carolinians, is a true tragedy to me. And I just am having a hard time understanding the thought process behind dismantling DEI, because UNC is already great at so many things like sports. We've always had a history of student organizing and protesting. We've had good relationships with the Chapel Hill and the larger North Carolina community. So this decision to kind of lean in to this right-leaning agenda is a bit crazy to me. It just doesn't make sense. And Pam, you and I have talked before about the affirmative action decision that the Supreme Court, the right-leaning Supreme Court, made that made it difficult for students to acknowledge, for schools to acknowledge the race of incoming students. And so we're kind of just hiding and running away from that conversation. UNC seems to have fully embraced the Supreme Court's decision to repeal affirmative action, yet their current chancellor is basically an affirmative action hire. I mean, he went to Duke, first of all, and second of all, he's never had any higher education experience. And so
Right.
the fact that he ended up becoming the permanent chancellor at UNC is just concerning to me. Nothing personally against him, but I just am not understanding that decision by the UNC board. Now, to answer your two questions, first of all, this election is very important. The young people that I'm talking to and the law students who I'm talking to are very excited and encouraged about this election. I'm so proud to be one of the co-founders of Law Students for Harris. We launched last week. We got trained this weekend here in Atlanta. We actually were able to go out that same day and canvass, knock on people's doors, tell them about Kamala Harris, tell them about the down ballot races, make sure that they're registered to vote. Wow, it was just an amazing experience that I was able to have with some of my law school peers. I think it's also great, Pam, that we're doing this because Kamala Harris was once a law student herself.
Yes.
She became an attorney, and she was the attorney general of a state and a United States senator, and of course, the vice president of the United States, where she sits currently. I think young people are very excited and encouraged, and Gen Z is going to turn out and vote for her. I firmly believe that. To your second question about Project 2025, law students are talking about that. Young people are talking about that. I think for the sheer fact, and Jalia might be able to add to this, that it's just crazy. They want to really take over and they want to take power from the people. Young people have so much to lose because we have so much life left to live. And
Right.
so Project 2025 is going to impact us significantly. It needs to go away. It does not need to become anything close to the law of this land. And as much as Trump wants to distance himself from it, we know that those are his thoughts, and he'll say anything to get elected, to stay in power. And we're not, it might be too early in the conversation to even talk about JD Vance, but I'm sure those are his policies and thoughts as well, when he's not busy being weird.
Yeah. Okay. Jalia, one of the great rites of passage, I consider this a great rites of passage when you attend college, is the right to peacefully protest. I was a big protester at Michigan. I want to discuss the Palestinian protest on campus there at UNC. There was an encampment. Kids were sleeping in tents. I know that the police came in and forcefully removed the students encamped on campus. Talk to us about the removal of the American flag and the frat boys and the raising of over $500,000 for them retrieving the flag and the subsequent concert held for them off campus at what was then a secret location. How has that impacted student relations on campus, or has it had any impact?
I mean, what you saw on April 30th is the administration stepping in more than they need to, simply. I mean, in the wrong time. This whole year, Students for Justice in Palestine, as well as other student organizations, have been advocating to simply be heard. And I think what we saw on April 30th was they weren't being heard, and so they felt like they had to resort to other matters or other measures. And so when you see the chancellor or you see UNC police coming in and basically, not listening and being forceful, I think that just shows what the university cares about. They care about, maintaining the presence of the flag, but they don't care about really listening to the concerns of students. And I think if they really sat down and listened to these concerns, we might not have been at that point on April 30th, but that was a direct result of them not being included, them not being heard and valued by administrators. And so I think with my role, it's been really difficult to kind of gain back the trust of students. A lot of students feel like they can't trust our administration. We've had several things that had happened since April 30th. For one, the Students for Justice in Palestine is no longer a registered student organization on campus. Two, the diversity, equity, inclusion was formally removed in May from the UNC policy manual, as we discussed earlier. Three, our honor court system has also been removed.
Oh,
our honor court system was unique in the fact that it was one of two honor court systems across the whole entire nation that allowed students who maybe had any misconduct cases get sent to other students. So they'd have another peer kind of deciding what their consequences would be for violating the honor court.
Mm-hmm.
The administration has struck that down, and now we have an administrative-led honor court system. And so
Mm-hmm.
what you're seeing over the combination of these past 4 or 5 months is students are losing trust in our university, and they're losing trust in our administration.
Mm-hmm.
So what I've been trying to do, I've just been trying to be as transparent as possible about the decisions that are happening, why they're happening, and how we can make sure that students are still heard and valued throughout these decisions.
Mm-hmm.
The court system happened. I only heard about this decision 2 days before the removal.
Within 2 days.
Within 2 days. Within 2 days of the removal, yes. And I know I'm going on a tangent here because the original question was just about Palestine and the protests that have been going on, but this is really a combination of all. They're not mutually exclusive. They actually have a lot to do with each other, and that's why I bring all of them up. And so I think it's so important that the administration takes time and they listen. And this is what DEI is. This is what DEI is. This is listening to students. You can't claim to be a university that values diversity and not value the diverse students on our campus.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, that's really what it boils down to. I think Jalia hit a lot of key points there. I'll just say again from this more outside perspective now, but as somebody who worked in student government as a student, unfortunately, at many universities, public, private, big, small, the administration just does not really understand who they serve. They're there to serve students. They're there to be representatives of the state and help lead students in partnership with the students. And so the fact that Jalia was only told about that major decision 2 days before, that's ridiculous. It just shows you that they think, and I guess they are in some senses, in control of everything. And they really don't give students the time of day to advocate for themselves. I'll also say that this is a wider comment, but in this country, in the United States of America, we often attack the blossom and give no thought to the roots. We attack the blossom, we give no thoughts to the roots. And this was very evident and clear with George Floyd and his murder. Everyone got all up in arms and in a tizzy about people who slashed police tires or busted in the window of an unoccupied building, but said nothing about a man who was kneeled on to his death for 7 minutes. Let's talk about what actually matters here. Jalia hit it on the head. If you don't believe what I just said, none of those protests would have happened that summer in 2020 if George Floyd wasn't murdered like that.
That's right.
If the police will stop murdering Black people will stop protesting the police for that specific issue. It's very easy. And so if you want to gain control of your campus, if you want to gain the trust of your students, you have to respond, in my experience, to what those students are asking you before it turns into a demand and everything gets contentious. And that goes to relationships. You have to build relationships. And so Jalia, I think, is doing a good job of that and trying to do that. But there's been so much change at UNC, the university, and UNC, the system, where it just no longer makes sense. How can you say we do have diversity of race? We have diversity of socioeconomic status. We have diversity of opinion, but we're going to take DEI out of our policy manual and we're going to get rid of our diversity office. Those words coming out of my mouth don't even make sense. And so we have to call this out.
Right.
Project 2025 wants to take diversity out of everything. It wants to punish schools and school districts who talk about Black history. I mean, we look at Florida where they wouldn't allow AP African American studies to go on. Right. This country is so much better than that, or at least we can be. And so I'm glad that leaders like Jalia are telling the truth and saying, hey, I'm not giving up hope, but something has to change. And I think one of the fronts that we're going to see that change occur is on the presidential front and on the political front. And hopefully with the election of Kamala Harris, she starts to really make a difference in the relationships that we have with each other as Americans.
Right. Greer, I was going to mention to you that I know that everything that's happening at your alma mater is unsettling, and you support, obviously, Jalia and all of her efforts. Tell us what you're up to at Emory Law School in Georgia.
Sure. I'm loving it down here now that I'm not a 1L. I'm in my second year of law school. I'm not, having to always be stressed. It is still stressful. It's a busy time, but I'm enjoying what I'm doing.
Mhm.
As you stated, Pam, I am at Emory University School of Law. I went straight through, and so I know Jalia has some pre-law experience, and I think is hoping to go to law school one day. It is a great experience. The first year is difficult. But now I have more autonomy. I can choose classes to take. I can choose clinics to participate in. And so I'm currently a student attorney with Emory's Juvenile Defender Clinic. And so we're able to represent young people here in the Atlanta metro area. I'm
Mhm.
also on the Emory Moot Court team. And so I get to really practice my oral advocacy skills as well as written advocacy skills with a small group of my peers. And I'm a part and active in the Black Law Student Association at Emory. And so I'm having a good time this year. I'm thank you in the comments for the congratulations, but really all glory goes to God for allowing me to have all of these opportunities to meet these amazing people and to be mentored by such great folks like yourself, Pam, and others who support me. I think if I could just go off on a brief tangent, it's very hard. It's hard for Black people and Black youth in America to get the support we deserve.
Mhm.
Gen Z faces so many challenges, but as I've said, I think on the first show, Pam, that I did with you, that generational gap, we've got to close it. We're
Mhm.
so much more alike than we are different in this
Right.
country. Old and young, old folks were once young,
That's
Black
right.
and white. There are issues that span race, men
Yes.
and women. We
Yes.
all want to be a part of community. And so we have to find the similarities and really harp on those. And again, I think that is why the Harris Walls administration is picking up so much traction. Uh,
Mhm.
I've said on this show and many, Pam, that the root word of politics, POL, just means of the people and of citizens. And
Yeah,
so
I remember that.
for me, talking about politics and talking about my daily life are interconnected. And so we have to stop being scared to talk about politics. And that's why I don't like some of these conversations that I'm seeing in the Black community, to be honest, among Black men and
Mhm.
others saying, well, I don't know much about Kamala Harris. I don't want to engage with that campaign. Trump is almost like a known figure, and I know what I'm getting from a conservative government.
Oh,
Yeah, you're getting your rights taken away.
well,
You're getting your families demolished. The
yep,
women in your life are going to be beaten down and broken and destroyed because these guys don't care for them. That's
right,
what you're getting. And so
right.
we have to be able to have these barbershop talks about what is at stake here. Project 2025 is not for Black men at all. It's not a program that's going to help us. And it's not for Black women either. And Black women are the backbone of society, specifically political society in America. So we
That's
have to do a better job of supporting each other. Like you said, Pam, I'm currently at Emory Law School, but honestly, this is just the next step for me on the journey that I'm so grateful to God for allowing me to trek. I mean, there is so much that young people and justice-minded people need to do in this country, and I'm looking forward to being a small part of that work.
right. Julia, I'm gonna go back and ask a question that I didn't write down for you. Have you noticed? Okay, first of all, we keep hearing this buzz about, oh, Black men, young Black men are all into Trump or whatever. I don't know if I totally believe that or not. I don't know if it's young Black men, middle-aged Black men. I don't know. Have you noticed anything there on campus? I just saw a statistic, a poll that showed that there was a big gender gap between Black women and Black men with the voting among young people. And so, what have you noticed any of this on UNC's campus,
Yeah,
Julia?
I can speak personally and say that the Black students on our campus are very educated, and
Mhm.
we tune in and we pay attention to the news. And I think that's very true for a lot of the Black men on campus. Obviously, as a woman, I'm not always in all of those spaces, but from
Mhm.
what I've heard, the Black men on campus are pretty engaged, and they understand what's wrong and that Donald Trump is not the way to go as far as this election comes. And I think that, again, Kamala Harris stepping into this new light as the presidential campaign, I think naturally people are going to be unsure about what that looks like or what a Harris administration will look like. But I think her being as vice president these past 4 years has really shown us what type of leader she's going to be. And she'll be able to do so much more as president. And so I think the notion that we don't really know who Kamala Harris isn't fair. Kamala Harris has showed us again and again and again who she is. She was attorney general, and then she was a senator, and now vice president. And this has nothing to do with her being a DEI hire. She is gifted and she is smart. And so I think students on my campus and Black men, I think they recognize that, and I think that they're going to go to the polls and they're going to vote for Kamala Harris.
Mm-hmm. I certainly hope so. God knows, I hope so.
I mean, that is even a misconception in and of itself, though. When I hear that from again, this is not all Black men, but I have seen, and I'm looking in the comments, somebody said they've seen several videos of YouTube of Black men saying that they're for Trump. And it seems this person in the chat says that these Black men are being paid and kind of forced to do those advertisements. Mm-hmm. I just think it's a misconception to say we don't know who Kamala Harris is and she's so unknown. First of all, that just means you're not really engaged in what's going on in your life in this country. She's the vice president of your country. So we know who she is. We remember her lighting up Brett Kavanaugh in those hearings. We remember the fact that she has been on the front lines of fighting for marginalized people when she was in California. She locked up child predators and made sure that they were punished. She went after big banks and big corporations taking advantage of Black and brown people. Mm-hmm. Trump wants to shoot people in Fifth Avenue and get away with it.
That's right.
He wants the Central Park Five to have been exonerated to still be locked up.
Right.
Let's get real here. I mean, I just don't know how he and his toupee are fooling so many Black people in this country. We've got to talk the truth. And again, I think young people, like Jalia said, are on the front lines of all of this. And we are educated, at least those of us at university. What we need to do now is become mouthpieces for our generation and go out to the rural parts of the state, talk to grandma, talk to auntie, talk to uncle in particular, and make sure that these men of color know what's at stake. Right. I was out door knocking, as I said, over the weekend, and a lot of people didn't even know that they were registered to vote. They don't remember registering to vote. In North Carolina, I pre-registered when I first applied for my driver's license. And so it would make sense that some of these people may have forgotten that moment here in Georgia. We reminded them that, yes, you are registered to vote, and let's help you make a plan to vote. We've got
to make sure they're still registered to vote because they've taken a whole bunch of people off the roll. See, that's the other problem, that we gotta, even though you may have been registered, you may not still be on the roll. So you gotta double check. And this, I mean, I'm telling you, this national voter registration, guys, is September 17th. September 17th is National Voter Registration Day. So please know that.
And Pam, if I could just add briefly, the deadlines are coming up in many states to request an absentee ballot. And so for myself, I still vote in North Carolina. I only have a few weeks to request that an absentee ballot is sent to me so that I can then send it back by Election Day. So college students need to make sure that they are aware of where they're registered to vote. I know Jalia is doing this work. And if they still want to vote at home, that's fine, but they need to request an absentee ballot unless they are physically going home to vote in this general election. So let's use our resources. Let's use Google and let's find out when these deadlines are. There's a deadline coming up next week for one state I know. So this stuff is coming up soon. It's important that we understand that absentee ballots do count, and that's how a lot of young people vote.
That's right. Guys, please share this video. The whole purpose of me even starting this channel was to educate and inform. And the quickest way, easiest way is to spread videos because people listen to them. You can listen, you can watch, you can listen and watch, but we gotta be able to inform people because what we may think is common knowledge to a lot of people, I have learned it is not. It is not common knowledge at all. So please share the video, inform your friends and family, talk to them about voting. Project 2025 is no joke. We already have elements of Project 2025 in existence now, like with the book bans, like with the rollback of voting and what have you. When you go vote, if you can't vote early, Make sure you got a sandwich, some water, whatever it is that you need, to a foldable chair, whatever to make yourself comfortable, because I suspect that we might have long lines this year. We might have long lines. So we just really want to be prepared.
Yeah, somebody in the chat, Pam, said the debate on Tuesday night is going to be good and crucial.
Yeah, that was Latrice. It is so crucial. Here in Durham, North Carolina, St. Joseph AME Church is having a watch party for the debate. Doors
That's awesome.
at 8 o'clock.
What are y'all doing on campus, Jalia? I know y'all are having some stuff for that.
Oh, absolutely. Well, we are utilizing Might As Well, which is a restaurant and bar on Franklin Street, and we're hosting a watch party. The UNC Young Democrats is hosting a watch party there, so that's an exciting, fun way to get students engaged. Lots of students like going out on Franklin Street, so I'm excited to see the turnout. But we've been doing lots of work, lots of different voter registration events coming up. Me, in my personal capacity, I've been doing voter empowerment series that get students interested in voting in a very interactive and engaging way. I did, if you've ever seen Legally Blonde, I did an Elwood skit to voting, and that was really fun. And so we're looking to do like some based off of reality TV about why students should vote. And yeah, we're going to be organizing, watching the debate, having fun with it, but also channeling all that energy and that passion into November 5th.
Right.
That's awesome.
That's awesome. I had a question for you, Greer, about Kamala Harris had that huge turnout. I think it was in Savannah, Georgia. And so tell me, Georgia's a bit of mystery to me, because I know that they took a bunch of people off the rolls of voting. What is the vibe there? What are you? I know what Atlanta is like. Okay, we know what Atlanta.
We don't have to worry about Atlanta this election. We're off the chain. When you have Meg the Stallion opening up for Kamala Harris, Atlanta's good. We're good.
Okay. But the vibe overall, I was shocked to see that many people at Savannah. I thought Taylor Swift had showed up or something.
Well, Pam, I think the strategy, Latrice is talking in the comments a bit about her political strategy. And I do agree with Latrice that Kamala Harris needs to be a little bit more upfront about who she is and not about what she is not in comparison to Trump. However, I think her strategy by doing these bus tours on the issues is very great. I think it's awesome. She did a bus tour here, and this is, I think, what you were alluding to, Pam, where she went to Savannah. She went to rural places in Georgia, almost the Warnock strategy when he and Senator Ossoff got elected, excuse me. Yes. And she went and proposed her platform and talked to people and then had a great rally at the very end. Now she's on an abortion and women's reproductive health bus tour, and she'll be in North Carolina on Thursday doing 2 rallies in one day. I mean, she is on the road, and I think people just need to engage. They need to be encouraged. Right. And so to answer your question about Georgia specifically, of course, we know Atlanta is excited and just so pumped about this election. But the rest of Georgia, in many ways, is very similar to North Carolina. They have mountains. They have a coast. It's rural. It's overwhelmingly rural. And so I have family from Georgia. My dad was born in Georgia. And so it's a state that's near and dear to my heart. I obviously attend law school here now. And so I think it's important that we are getting out the vote. I think what Democrats and Kamala Harris are doing now, and this is why I'm so excited about Law Students for Harris, is we're shoring up the vote in places that do lean to the left. And what that means is in Atlanta, we go out. It's a pretty liberal city. But as I mentioned, there are people who don't even remember that they're registered to vote. And so putting this election at the forefront of everyone's minds and drawing that comparison between who Kamala Harris is and who Donald Trump is very important. And so I'm looking forward to the debate. I know Georgia is going to have a lot of election watch parties around the state. And I think it's similar to North Carolina, Pam, in that both of these states are going to be toss-ups for this election. Right.
So, Jalia, I want you to get into your imagination. We wake up on November 6, 2024, and VP Kamala Harris is now President-elect Harris. That is what we are channeling, right? What is your top policy issue that you would like to see her tackle? And it can be several, but we want to talk about some actual policy things too now.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think I would just like to echo again what Greer was saying earlier about how Atlanta is so fun and the fact that Vice President Harris brought out Meg the Stallion. I think just looking at the distinction between the Democratic National Convention a couple weeks ago and the RNC a couple weeks ago, it's this very stark difference. I think what that showed us is that politics can be fun. I mean, we saw Lil Jon, we saw Anthony Hamilton, we had Anderson Clayton super excited about North Carolina. And so I think what Greer brought up about it being a fun experience and it should be happy and joyful. I think that's what we've seen from Vice President Harris in this campaign. And so your point about policy, I think, again, harping down on reproductive health care and access for women is something that I'm particularly interested in seeing take its course over next year. It's something that's very close to home for North Carolinians. We've had a North Carolina General Assembly that has really tried to harp down on taking away this access for women. And so I think that's the biggest policy point. And especially too, seeing this type of advocacy come from a woman is going to be so exciting, especially at the national level. So that's a big policy that I'm looking forward to.
Anything else? Any other policies that reproductive health would be your top one off the bat? Anything else you can
I think oh, go ahead. And I think again, like as a student, like continuing the efforts of the Biden-Harris administration when it comes to student debt. I know that Supreme Court decision last summer, a lot of students were banking on that. And so, college is just super expensive nowadays, and you shouldn't it shouldn't be a burden to go to school. And so I think I'm looking for her to continue those efforts.
And I would jump in too, just to, I guess, a bit of a somber moment here before I talk about the policy. The school shooting that just occurred here in Georgia, an hour away from me, where 4 people were killed, many others injured. So many things went wrong in that case. But gun violence prevention has always been, at my core. And I think that that's a policy I would like to see Kamala Harris and even Governor Walz, who I know has experience on both sides of this issue.
Yes, he has.
And I think that's, a plus, but I would like to see them stay aggressive on gun reform and gun control. Again, we have to get away from being scared to talk about these things and have relationships with people where we feel free to have candid conversations. I mean, gun control is not a scary thing. We have too many guns in this country. They need to be controlled so that our elementary, middle, and high school students in particular are not killed in their places of learning. If that's a controversial thing for you to hear, too bad. We're at the point where it's absolutely insane. Literally, the definition of insane is doing the same thing, expecting a different result.
Right.
That, Pam, I just don't even know how to comprehend so much of what this country does at times. Either secure the schools and make every student walk through a metal detector at this point, or do something about guns. Those are the only options. This old thoughts and prayers, and J.D. Vance said something like, we need to figure out this fact of life. Well, it doesn't have to be a fact of life.
No, it's not.
We're letting it become a fact of life, or it has been a fact of life. And if we didn't do anything after Sandy Hook, I just get so depressed about what we can do. So that is a policy issue that I hope Kamala Harris and Governor Walz address aggressively. I know you were coming in, Jalia. Go ahead.
Yeah, Jalia, go
ahead. And I definitely would like to emphasize that point again. I think right after you graduated, Greer, in the fall of 2023, we unfortunately had a lockdown and a shooting on our campus. And, I think it's interesting how we really did come together as a community, but I really would like to see more action afterwards, after such a drastic and terrible and disheartening situation for students to have to experience. And then for the professor that was killed that day. And I think that, Vice President Harris and Governor Walz, I think they're really going to double down on that. And like what Greer was saying, being aggressive. And I think the thing that makes Vice President Harris and Governor Walz, what will make them successful in this role is that people are really excited about them. And And another thing about people is that conservatives have even been going out and saying that they are voting for Kamala Harris this fall.
I
And so
know.
I think what you're seeing is when Vice President Harris, in her role now and her relationships with President Biden, they really emphasize this point of trying to push bipartisan legislation. And so I'm interested to see how she will channel that in come January when she is hopefully elected.
Yes.
And a
Yes.
mental illness, just to respond again to the chat, Deb Reynolds Carter, we do need to address youth mental illness. Unfortunately, conservatives in government in North Carolina and at the congressional level have shown that they don't really care to make investments in mental health and mental illness prevention and so or support. And so it's just very unfortunate and difficult for me to understand what is the pathway forward here. I think it has to do with guns. We have to do something differently because we are not the only country where young people have mental challenges.
No, of
But
course.
we're the only country where school shootings happen like this.
Right.
Also, let's talk about it. Gun violence as a whole needs to be addressed. We
Right.
need to invest in preventing the interracial shootings that happen. And we need to figure out why it's always young white kids with mental illness that are doing these school shootings. That's just a fact. It's not really other racial groups doing it. And
No.
you would think that a lot of these conservatives would want to, because at least in North Carolina, many of the conservative leaders, if not most, are white. And so these are your people, when it comes to race, and you're not even wanting to address this issue. I just don't understand. So I wanted to just shout out Deb Reynolds Carter in the chat and say, yes, mental health is a part of this. I only mentioned the school security and gun control because I don't see the Republicans doing much when it comes to mental illness on behalf of the people.
No, not at all. And the other big thing is that what gets me is that the NRA has so much power, and all that is money. It's money. The policymakers, Congress has given their love of money to supersede their love of their children, their love of our future. Essentially, that's what's happened. It's really like one of the deadliest sins. One of the deadly sins is greed. So it's like this money hunger has fueled what we're seeing with all this lack of legislation, because they're paying them off.
Not only that, Pam, but
they're paying them off.
Not only that, but people told me when I was organizing, and these are Moms Demand Action, Students Demand Action, people who've been in this work and have been directly affected. They told me when I was in high school, starting out in this work, that these legislators weren't going to do anything until it was their child being killed, their sister being shot in schools, their granddaughter having to help, put gauze on their teacher's bullet wound. I mean, isn't that crazy that it has to be that personal for our leaders to do something that would benefit the larger community? Let's get so serious. We have not only a greed problem in this country, but a selfishness problem.
Yes.
Everything has to be what's in it for me.
Yes.
That is not how societies operate. That is not how communities thrive.
Right.
And so we need to get back to community. I think Black folks need to get back to community. The church, St. Joseph's does this well. The church needs to start educating. If the schools are getting rid of race, the church needs to put race and Black history back into their Sunday school lessons and make these connections between love and justice and community, because our leaders, specifically conservative leaders, are not having those types of conversations, and it is leading to harm, to mental health issues and actual death. I mean, let's get serious and let's get back to community.
Right. Jalia, when I was reading up about your election, I just think I've seen where you have been in student body government for over the years, literally your whole career there at UNC. And I'm so impressed with that. And you being the president of over 32,000 students there at UNC is phenomenal. How can we support you? How can people support your efforts of what you're trying to do there at UNC?
Honestly, paying attention to what happens at our UNC community and really doing our research. I think it's quick to get discouraged about the headlines that we see. You see DEI taken away, or you see the honor court system or a transition of a new chancellor that a lot of people have different feelings about. I think really doing your research and reaching out and really understanding the students in the community. Again, what Greer was saying earlier about building relationships. If you can make things personable, then we can get things accomplished. And I think that's really what I'm looking forward to. I mean, I've been leaning already on people outside of outside of UNC Chapel Hill, such as my other peer institutions, such as NC State and UNC Charlotte. And I've been leaning a lot on them for advice. And so I think I really just need people to pay attention to what's happening at UNC. Again, the more pressure that we can apply for externally, the more decisions like these can be changed. And I'm hopeful in the fact that DEI came to our school in 2019 and it left in 2024. And just as fast as it came and it left, I'm hopeful that it can come back. But the only way that we can do that is we have pressure not only internally from the student body and the different community members here, but also pressures from the rest of our state. UNC Chapel is so influential that it has the power to influence the other peer institutions within the UNC system. And so have community members that are invested in what's happening here, we really are benefiting the whole state of North Carolina. And so I think that's the best thing that we can do is people just paying attention to the decisions that are made at our school, asking questions, asking about why things are the way they are. A big part of my platform was about transparency and helping students understand who our administrators are, the work that they do on campus, but also the state of the Board of Trustees, also the Board of Governors, helping understand who these people are. And I think when you know the information, you're better able to advocate. And so when we see decisions that happen on our campus or in the UNC system, we know exactly why they're happening and we know how to advocate and we know who to contact. And so that's the best way that everyone else and on this call or people that are listening or thinking about DEI and wondering why things are the way that they are is to get involved and to really learn and do your research.
Yeah, I think that's so powerful. Just if I could, I think that's a great question, Pam. I appreciate you asking it because so much of the time, you know, young people, students are just seen as people who have it all together, or they're young, so they have energy and they'll make it through. But it is difficult, right? Life is difficult for us all. And so checking in on the students and the young people in your life is another way that you can do just what Jalia is talking about, supporting us, pouring into us so that we have the energy to keep fighting the good fight, keep getting into good trouble, as John Lewis said. I mean, reach out to the Jalias, reach out to myself, reach out to any other young people you know, and just ask them, how are you? How is your mental health? Are you taking time for yourself? Jalia talked earlier about politics being fun. Ask young people, what are they doing for fun? We need to have balanced lives in order to thrive and be successful. We can't just focus on work. We can't just focus on school and nothing else. We need to have good relationships with our family and our friends and our faith institutions. And so, like Jalia said, reaching out to us, but also reaching out to the people who we're supposed to be leading with, who are making these bad decisions. That's important. We're also seeing, and an important part of this is that, as Jalia said, UNC's decisions kind of trickle out to the other flagship institutions in the state. These decisions are affecting graduate schools as well. You know, I'm hearing of law schools and master's programs who are de-emphasizing diversity. And they're saying that we don't need to think about that as much. And so that matters because now they're not going to consider race. They may not consider other factors in awarding scholarships. And so it's harder for marginalized people to get into these higher education institutions. And we know that degrees are important. They're becoming more normal and regular, which I think is great, but they're very important, especially for Black and brown folks. And so how can we support these people? We know that they're not defined just by their race, but when we stop talking about the factors that make us unique, we really start to lose our way. And so I would say specifically reach out to folks you know at UNC. If it's in the administration, email, call them, ask them, demand a response. What's going on? Here's how I feel. You're a community member and you're entitled to make those sorts of requests. And then reach out to students like Jalia at UNC, like, you know, your grandson or your granddaughter, and make sure that they're okay, that they're having fun in their classes, that they're learning something. but also you can't get those 4 college years back. They were some of the most fun of my life. And so I loved people checking in on me and pushing me to do new and different things. It really makes a difference.
Right, right. Jalia, anything you'd like to add about that?
I would just say that is so true. I mean, being a Black student on campus is already hard, but being a student leader, a lot of the movement on our campus has come from Black and marginalized students. And so you come into campus, it's already hard being a student. You know, you have to balance academics and then maybe getting involved in extracurriculars. But then you have the added stress of seeing things like DEI, which support your very existence on campus, being taken away. So I would just echo what Greer said about checking in on students and understanding that being a student leader on campus isn't an easy job. You know, a lot of times you're underpaid or you're not paid at all, and you're expected to show up and perform consistently. And so, yeah, again, just checking in on our student leaders is very important.
Yeah. Jalia, I'm checking in on you right now. How are you doing, Jalia? How are you doing?
I am doing okay. This week was very, very hard because we saw those numbers, and I knew those numbers were coming. I had been alerted a couple weeks ago about these numbers coming and the possible shift. But when you look at the numbers and you see them for yourself, and then when you go and you see it on campus, it just makes sense of how real it is. I think I spoke at the Black Student Movement Convocation a couple weeks ago, welcoming first-year students. And while I was so excited to be there, I couldn't believe that there were so many less students on campus. And I was just hoping that when I saw the numbers that maybe, you know, some of the students didn't decide to show up that day and maybe they had other plans, but no, it's a direct result of what we've seen. So this week has been a really hard week for me, but I think just understanding that I have a support system is so key. I think oftentimes as student leaders, we forget that we have a team of folks that are helping us along this journey, as well as parents, family members, community members, you, Greer, that we can lean on for advice and support. And so I think today I really tried to center myself as to what I'm here to do. I'm here to get a degree. Yes, I'm here to serve students, but I have to prioritize myself sometimes and my well-being.
Please.
And so that's what I've been thinking about a lot recently.
Yeah, that's powerful. And just to follow up, so the community watching knows, this was posted by the Affirmative Action Coalition at UNC and the Black Student Movement. In 2023, 10.5% of incoming first-year students were Black. 10.5. This year, that number has gone down to 7.8. That is roughly 25% less, or 150 fewer Black students in the first-year class this year.
How many? 100 what?
150 fewer Black students at UNC in the class of 2028.
That's a big number.
That's a big number. That's a huge number when you think that, I think when I started UNC, Black students were about 10% of the entire university, right? Which is much better than it used to be. And now that number is going back down to in the 7%. And I think it's important to note that North Carolina is 22% Black. 722. Something is going on. It should be a little bit closer. And so we've got to call this out. The American Indian and Alaska Native population, American Indian and Alaska Native population, their community is down. They're now at like 1%. And the indigenous and Hispanic Latino populations are also down. So, I mean, I just don't understand. I don't know where they're going, or if they're just not enrolling in UNC because maybe they knew what was coming, that they weren't going to be prioritized. But UNC is losing out on some really key student leaders and some great future leaders just in general who may have wanted to go to UNC, but now we're doing this whole anti-DEI thing. And I always have said, Pam, since people started coining the phrase, that DEI stands for definitely earned it. You know, when you're in these spaces as Black and brown folks and you're succeeding and people say, well, how did you do this in spite of your race? How did you do this even though you're a marginalized person? It's because I worked hard and I earned it. And so what these schools who are dismantling DEI are doing are telling folks like Jalia, telling folks like myself, telling folks like you, Pam, that you haven't earned anything. You don't deserve to be where you are. And there is no racism. You should be able to do just as well as anybody else in this country.
Right.
Exactly.
It's very unfortunate, but more so than that, it's just not who we are as Americans. We value diversity. We value assisting people. And Pam, I've said it on this show, so I'll say it right now. We throw millions and billions of dollars at these other countries and at people in other countries who may be suffering. Very true. Why do we not have that same energy? Why don't we keep that same energy for the marginalized people in our country? Our Supreme Court is off being corrupt and ruling that it's a crime to be homeless. And we can't help the marginalized people in this country, but we somehow find ways, like during COVID, to bail out airline companies. We somehow find ways to invest in wars going on abroad. We somehow find ways to do these things, but we don't help ourselves. And so when it's time to be selfish as a nation, you could say, and help all of your people, America says, if you're Black, brown, and marginalized, we're not going to help you. You've got to work twice as hard to get our help. And it's just not fair.
Right. I had a group on a few months back called ADOS. It was American Descendants of Slavery. And they were very controversial. Yet they made that same argument that we're sending money overseas or whatever, but here we are, American descendants of slavery, and everybody else gets a piece of the pie but us. It was an interesting concept. Let's see.
Yeah, Jalia, I wonder, since that point was brought up by Pam, what are students, because I know we would sometimes have these conversations when I was at UNC, what do students talk about when it comes to reparations, when it comes to, where the money is going in this country, Jalia? Are there still conversations at UNC that Black students are having about reparations and the need for more community investment?
Oh, absolutely. There are always those conversations going on. I mean, I think DEI was a part of that. Affirmative action can be seen as a form of reparations for students and in marginalized communities. So I definitely think that those conversations are still going. It's just, honestly, it's very hard to see those types of things and see them through when you have, on the day-to-day things like DEI getting taken away. It's hard to think about other forms of reparations from a student perspective.
Yeah, that's valid. That's valid. You have a lot going on there. Always has been a lot going on at UNC.
Yeah. And what's so crazy is that we learn so much from one another. Now, don't get me wrong. I didn't, unfortunately, go to an HBCU, and I could see where that would have been a great benefit to me. And HBCU enrollment is sky high now, which is great, which is absolutely wonderful. But not every student can afford to go. Let's keep it a buck.
That's
because
right.
A lot of those schools are private, and that entails private school tuition, and they're out of state, except for unless you stick around North Carolina, we got a bunch of them. But maybe you want to go to Howard, maybe you want to go, to Spelman or Morehouse or whatever. And then you have the issue of them not having the capacity for the housing. Howard got a whole bunch of kids in, but I'm thinking, okay, are y'all going to have the same problem with your housing again? Because it doesn't make sense. You gotta have the capacity to deal with the overload or the blessings that you get, right?
That's right. Yeah, that's a great point. North Carolina has so many HBCUs. Last year during the school year, I had the opportunity to tour Morehouse's School of Medicine. I didn't even know they had a medical school when I moved down here. It's a great. Oh, yeah. Super impressive facility. And so new chancellor at North Carolina Central, who I just adore, Dr. Carrie Dixon, she was at Elizabeth City State. She helped launch their aviation and flight program. They're teaching Black students and students of color how to fly planes. I mean, there's so much goodness in these HBCUs. However, Pam, you're right. Sometimes there are issues that paint them in a bad light, specifically when it comes to housing. I think we all remember the viral videos of what happened at Howard with the housing situation, the mold and the animals and the students just being so I'm upset about that. Morehouse has had issues with their housing being overburdened. North Carolina Central at the start of this school year was really scrambling and trying to make sure that all their students could be housed. And of course, we, the three of us in particular, know that that comes from a historic lack of funding for these places. I mean, these schools were designed because Black folks couldn't be schooled at other predominantly white institutions. However, there's still, in my opinion, is something to be said for strategic leadership, and really holding people's feet to the fire. And so to your point, Pam, if you're going to open up enrollment and you're seeing these high rates of enrollment, you need to be really beating these corporations or these private donors' doors down to make sure that they can buy you some houses or something, because this doesn't make sense for you to have all these students coming in and you don't have the housing capacity. That turns people away. That turns people off, rather. And so, yeah, those are a few of my thoughts. But I think North Carolina is really in a prime position right now to do good work, to do good things. And I think our HBCUs and HBCU graduates are a large part of that. I mean, I think A&T still produces the largest number of Black engineers every year. So
they do. A&T, they sure do. We won't say that too loud, because then we might get a bunch of Eagles, North Carolina Central Eagles, saying, you didn't say about NCCU. It's all good. It's all good. But I tell you, I'm just, it's a breath of fresh air to talk to you guys, because like I said, I just need to be encouraged, because I'm so personally frustrated to see that we're in a statistical heat in this election. I don't understand how that could be possible with a man like Trump. Or I don't see how that's possible. I don't see how. This is an interesting comment. How do you strategically address the issues of DEI? How do we assist in recruiting students to PWIs? And how do we create organizations on campus that support the efforts of DEI? No.
I think
Go ahead, Julia. I think you were frozen. We got you now.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, because our diversity and inclusion office was going to do post affirmative action decision, which is to have these sort of targeted outreach programs. And so, yeah, I'm honestly curious as to how we do that too. But I think our D&I efforts have been structured under this new thing called student success programs. And so I'm hoping that student success, which honestly, it just shows us how little they knew about DE&I, because DE&I was about student success and making sure that students had an equitable experience at Carolina and were being able to transition into UNC. And so I think hopefully, so a lot of those programs like Project Uplift which Project Uplift is a program that has to do with getting underserved communities into UNC and allowing them to explore what life like here is Carolina. And so I'm hoping that, even though the name is changing, that some of the work can still be done to really make sure that we're getting students into Carolina. And again, like Greer was saying earlier, having a university that is reflective of our state. Again, we talk so much about how the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill is supposed to serve the state. We produce leaders every single year that go out into the community, but we need to make sure that we're taking in the leaders that we already have in the state.
Right.
That's powerful. That's powerful. And I'll just tack on to add to answer the last part of that question, which was, how do we create organizations on campus that support the efforts of DEI? I guess I was reading it quickly the first time I saw it, but I immediately thought of organizations that are already on these campuses that we can support, that may be like affinity groups. For example, BSM, the Black Student Movement at UNC Chapel Hill, that was an important part of my time at UNC. And I think a lot of Black alumni will say that was an important support group for them, because we know that UNC and some of these other institutions that were, unfortunately, if not founded on, ushered in white supremacy, often do not see the need to support those students, do not go as hard for those students' success as they do others. And so it's important to have groups like that. In law school, they call that the Black Law Students Association, BOLSA. And so I'm a part of that at Emory Law School. I don't know about BSM. Jalia might be able to speak to this, but at least at the graduate school level, people can donate to our cause. They can support us. They can invest in students and reach out, but they can also give money. And so we have many alumni of Emory University who are Black who say, hey, I want to support the current Black law students. I do love the university as a whole because it afforded me a degree, but I want to target my giving to the Black law students because I know that those types of groups are underfunded, especially when it comes to student governing. And so I can't speak to that specific point for BSM, but really reach out to some of these groups, whether it's the Latino Association. I know we have all sorts of viewers on here, Pam, the Asian American students or the Muslim students. If you want to invest in those groups, reach out to their president. If you want to have a meeting with them, I'm sure they would love to gain some support. I would say, and encourage you to follow through. Don't just talk the talk, but actually walk the walk and do as much as you can for these organizations that are like affinity groups at these schools, because we see the times are changing, as they say, and this support from the institutions themselves seems to be whittling down. And so unfortunate, but to somebody's point earlier, we have to be strategic and we can't just accept that and get lazy. We have to do what we can as individuals to support and engage with our larger community.
I want to read. I know this is my friend KL, when she's been on this show before. She's talking about being a certified DEI trainer since 2000, a mentee of Dr. Derek Bell, the great professor from Harvard, who is the founder of CRT. And CRT has nothing to do with the Black history that we're teaching the kids in elementary and school or whatever. That was one of those law terms or whatever that he had. These terms like woke are co-opted and weaponized. Yes, they are. We must consistently disrupt the disinformation to retain legitimate use. I wanted to read that because that is a 3 snaps. That is a very important thing. Let's see.
I agree with that point a lot. I mean, I think especially, like, I'll just jump in and say, like, I don't think the North Carolina General Assembly understands what diversity, equity, inclusion means. So DEI works for everyone. We have a richer classroom and a richer experience on campus when we have DE&I. We attract so many more faculty and professors to come and do research here when we have DE&I. So I think when we kind of belittle these terms into just buzzwords, it damages it, because now we have folks that really don't understand the purpose.
Right. And I have to give a shout out to MIT, because they said immediately, this has been a few weeks ago or so, that their numbers were down with marginalized groups, and they said that this is going to harm their community overall, because we know this to be true. I know this to be true of my generation, that I went to a high school in Detroit, that it was a college prep high school, was public. And we had the richest to poorest kids there, white, Black, Hispanic, Arab. I mean, it was, it was the whole mix. The best description I can give you, if you ever saw the movie Fame and all the dancing and stuff, we had performing arts, but we also had high sciences and stuff. We had curriculums, and it was such a rich environment. And I'm telling you, when you have a mixture of all of those different people, it is just so, I can't even explain it. And I'm still friends with all of these friends so many years later, because and so much it's such a strong vibe about it, because it was such a rich experience. Diana Ross went there. A lot of famous people went there. I'm gonna tell you, you had to get accepted to go get in. But that diversity, you can't sell it. You can't nothing.
Yeah, it's so valuable. And Pam, thank you for sharing that, because that just reminded me to be grateful for the high school experience that I had in Raleigh. Shout out to Sanderson High School, which is also where my father went. And it's one of the more, or at least was when I was there, diverse high schools. It's a public school. I'm a public school kid. And like you were saying, Pam, some of those same minority groups were represented there. We had Muslim students, we had immigrants, we had refugees.
Yes.
That I got to know, Black, white, and Latino, of course, or brown, I guess I should say, Asian American, even some indigenous folks. And all of those people contributed to a better experience. I just can't imagine what that school would have been like if it were all Black or all white. It would have been so different, And so we're not saying that DEI is diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I think people just talk about it like they do woke and these other phrases, but let's break it down. Diversity, that means the loveliness of different opinions and of different experiences and different backgrounds. We all come from different places, so it shouldn't be that foreign to understand what diversity means and is. Equity, having everyone on the same playing field where we can all reach for the same opportunities. And then the most qualified are those who receive the opportunities. I think a lot of people think that DEI just puts up unqualified people because of the color of their skin. That's not what it is. It's equity. We, as marginalized people, just want an equal shot. White people for so long have dominated many industries in this country. And that doesn't mean that, all white people are bad. It just means that Black and brown folks have not had a fair shot. And so that's what equity is. And then inclusion, including all voices. You could disagree with what I just said, but I want to hear from you. I want you at the table with my corporation. I want you at school. Let's debate. Let's argue from a place of decency. That's inclusion. Nobody is talking about DEI like that. That's why people co-opted. Nobody talked about CRT correctly, so it got co-opted. I mean, critical race theory does not mean that all white people are bad. That's a whole other conversation. I didn't even hear that concept until I got into a higher level class at UNC. But as you mentioned earlier, Pam, CRT is usually taught in law schools, not elementary schools. So we got to call this stuff out.
That's right. That's right. Listen, well, it's a 9/11 and we have had a wonderful, wonderful conversation. Listen, everybody, please hit the thumbs up, subscribe to my YouTube channel. Please, please support the work. Share this video. Share this video. We want to educate more and more people. That's how things happen. We have to keep the conversations going. And subscribe to my channel, please. I'm on the road to 1,000, and I want to have 1,000 subscribers by the end of September as a birthday gift to me. So please subscribe, everybody. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Okay, so let's wave everybody off. Good night. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam.
Thank
you. Good to see you, Jalia.
It's so nice to see you and good to see you here.